chair?
He's going to be by himself. After tonight, I think I might just relinquish everything.
Hang in there.
Just way more than I can.
Gets to be a lot, doesn't it?
Lord, we have a quorum.
There we
I
go.
wanted to talk to the over-harvesting of sports.
Vice chair, you sit right there.
Some new regs, not together. First, with some new regs. There's a meeting in a long time with the department. Just haven't tried it.
Thick stuff. Well, not much pressure. I mean, everybody does it out of my bill.
Come to find out, I guess he's got family in Chicago that would get decent guys. You'll find a trace that guy.
Oh, it'll probably
Well, I'll go put it back.
it took about an hour.
And that's filtered.
Yeah, it's a
Will be
7:50.
here, right?
Sitting there, or?
No, that's Eddie.
Oh, okay.
Eddie.
And what I do is I transfer.
Jeff Fun, he's in town.
Yeah. I'm surprised they didn't show up.
Saw him the other day.
Yeah, you got there. He's in the harbor office every day. Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. It's Wednesday, January 11th. And board members Dave Tinas, Joseph Quitzland, Glenn Reed, Bob Martin, Cart Wallheater, and myself, Mike Banks, are in attendance. Jeff Funt is absent, but I think he'll probably be here soon. And we have the city manager and our harbor department representative. Okay, approval of the minutes.
I approve the minutes of the December 14th meeting. I make a motion to approve the minutes.
We've got one thing under item 7, unfinished business. Our clerk wanted us to make a motion to have her change that. Just the language that's in the recording. I think we recommended best management practices, a motion last time.
On December 14th.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what was the change? There was an amendment that you were going to make? Is that what it was?
You were going to go back in the minutes and do that change for
What
us.
my understanding is that the last time around, we missed a motion near the end of your discussion that said you were recommending to city council to use best management practices. That's not reflected in your printed minutes.
Right.
Okay,
So
here.
we'll
So
go back and we'll get that in there for you.
okay, so everybody follows that?
Is it right here?
Yeah. Yeah, it is in the unfinished business, but as far as the minutes go, other than that change, is everybody
I'll second it now.
okay? It's been moved and seconded to adopt the minutes with the change that we found under unfinished business. So all those in favor, respond by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Minutes have been approved. Okay, is there any amendment and or an approval of the meeting agenda? Anybody want to add anything or hear a motion to adopt them?
Most to
agenda?
adopt.
I'll second it.
Okay, it's moved and seconded to adopt the meeting agenda as written. All those in favor respond by aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, visitors' views unrelated to the agenda. Is there anybody in the audience or anybody have any views they want to?
I want to wish everybody a Happy New Year.
Thank you.
You too.
Thank you.
Okay, hearing none, visitors' views related to the agenda. Did you want to speak when we get to that issue, or do you want to speak now?
I'm just here because I'm curious why this has come back to the Harbor Board for the 3rd time. And so we'll see how that evolves.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Harbor Master report. I guess we'll wait until Eddie gets back to get that little report. Or, you know, we've got a copy of the report that Glorianne gave us before she left. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to read through it, but we'll let Eddie go over that. Unfinished business. Scow Bay lease pollution insurance requirement. Okay, do you want to adopt a discussion, or how do you want to deal with what we've gone over the last few meetings?
Maybe we get a management update on what he's recommending.
Yeah, Steve, do you have a
I
report
sort of
to
do
give
that,
us?
although I think I can. I think it's in your packet. You know, I put together kind of a quick draft of the various things and have heard back from various members, both Glow and Mike, that that's not going to work. And I mentioned it, I think both Mike and Glow, then what the city council is expecting is then something coming back with something else then. If what I put together is not workable, then tear it apart, but we've got to come up with something and so that I can present it back to the city council that's acceptable to the harbor board and also to the city council. And that is going to be some form of insurance coverage, as I understand the city council has talked about. I think I've heard, and maybe this is acceptable, Mark or Rick, whoever can jump in, that adopting something similar to like what Wrangell has done with a use permit, facility use agreement that talks about insurance, not necessarily at the boat level, but for any businesses operating, and then the statement of following best management practices. So, Mark, am I paraphrasing this properly?
It sounds like kind of where we're at from what I can see. I mean, I know that one document that you gave to Glow and from Homer, I didn't read the whole thing, but you and I talked about it, and you kind of thought it followed the best management practices with a little bit of a...
Yeah, I mean, I didn't, but again, I'm not a boat owner, so, the details may be lost on me. I mean, when I looked at the Clean Harbors thing, I didn't see a lot of difference from it to the best management practices. But again, I admittedly don't know much about what you guys do for a living yet. So, but in that, I think that was a piece of it that Mike brought up, and then Glow as well. I think one of the key issues was the requirement, as I wrote it up, was saying that boat owners within, and I put a scale together that is not based on any reality of it, just kind of, I threw numbers at it that said, boats a certain size are going to require insurance and at a certain level. And I think that was one of the big issues, is the boat owners really didn't want any form of insurance requirement on the boats themselves. And that's what I was hearing back. And guys, please,
Right.
if I'm
Yeah.
saying it improperly, tell me that.
That's pretty much the setting, I think, for the fleet and pleasure boat owners and whatnot, is it shouldn't be a requirement unless there's a clause like what this board has done in the past, is we read over Wrangell's requirement when you haul out on, then you have to sign that you have it, and you have to sign.
Or somebody's got to have that.
Right, somebody has to have it when the boat is hauled out, and that's basically where we were at.
Right.
We don't want to go into the harbor with this,
Right.
and if you read that document, the Clean Harbors thing, it would basically shut the town down. And there's so many requirements to be certified a clean harbor. We wouldn't be able to dump any fish wastes. That means the canneries wouldn't be able to grind their fish waste and put it into the harbor.
And I didn't read it that way,
Yeah,
but I mean, fair enough.
But that, and then the street runoff, we wouldn't be able to dump snow into the harbor. That would be a no thing. And I think the way it reads is there's a lot of requirements for any runoff, which street runoff would have to be filtered. It just doesn't apply to this community proximity to the harbors.
Well, and this just as, not arguing with you. By the way, we already have that requirement. DEC is already telling us that that's a problem, and that we have. I mean, for example, as we're designing the library, we had to put oil separators on the water coming off the parking lot.
Yeah.
So that's a requirement that whether it's specifically listed or not, we're already having to do it.
Right, and I think that would fall under new construction.
Yeah, and that's kind of how. I mean, and again, I don't want to debate the Clean Harbors thing. That was just my
Right.
attempt to try to throw something out there. But the impression I get is like the best management practices, pretty much voluntary. It's kind of like you're saying you're going to try to do these things, and as you redesign a parking lot, you put that in, and that's pretty much what we're being forced to do anyway by, other agencies that are involved in this. So, but again, I mean, if the Clean Harbors thing is not something we're interested in doing, it's too, I'm not wedded to anything at this point. It's more along the lines of trying to get this issue off of dead center.
Yeah. Well, I think in regards to the clean, we all want a clean harbor. That's the bottom line. But I think to try to adopt the practices to make this a certified harbor, it'd be long ways down the road and be something that we could look forward to when we change things. But to come up with that criteria at this point, it's just not feasible.
I don't think that the manager intended the harbor to automatically switch over to mirror what Homer claims they have. They're clean, documented as a clean harbor, certified as a clean harbor. Like you said, I think he just put that out there for something to feed off of. And obviously it was a little bit stringent, but another point, I don't think the council, at least my perspective of what the council is talking about, doesn't include mandatory insurance to be tied up in the harbor. I think this is just my feel for it. If you're gonna get hauled out and work done on a piece of leased property, that is what they're more concerned about. That is my take on it, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, and that's where I'm trying to get is what is council's feeling on this? Is it to the level of a boat, or is it to the level of the people working on the boats?
And if you look at the Wrangle contract and read it, and of course our attorney says, well, you sign a piece of paper that says you have that, he says it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
But they have to have insurance to be hauled out and placed on a piece of city property and done. I think that's what we're kind of looking to an end result, maybe.
Yeah, and I can fully understand exactly that perspective of it, but I think that we need to make it clear that it doesn't go into the harbor.
Yeah.
And the council needs to understand it because there are council members that don't understand the harbor issues. And the same thing with the clean harbors. We got to make it clear to them that if they read through that document, they'll understand that it's just something you can't turn overnight. But there are best management practices going down that road. Eventually, as we change things, that's probably a very good thing to do. But I just want to make it clear to the council that these details about insurance. Okay, somebody on the council might not understand that you just don't go buy marine liability insurance. You just can't walk off the street and just go buy it. You have to get your boat surveyed. You have to have hull and machinery, and then you have to be, it's a long process and it's very expensive. So I think that if your read is right, I think that's probably where we've been all along. As far
Right,
as
and that's a lot more realistic, I think.
yeah.
That wouldn't necessarily cover like property damage if your boat catches on fire up there, or somebody gets hurt, or you have a spill.
My
You know,
policy would, personally.
Well,
$500 a year. I mean, just to throw a
Okay.
number out.
Okay.
I mean, this is. I mean, the Wrangle, they call it their Marine Service Center Facility Use Agreement, which we play games with the names. Its insurance requirement, and this is for the benefit of the council and the folks sitting here. There's no marine liability insurance required on it. It calls for general liability insurance, motor vehicle liability insurance if you're using a boom truck or a forklift or something, and then workers' compensation insurance if you're employing people. And what I've been told is that general liability insurance does not cover marine spills, meaning, we'll pick on John since he's here for. Is he behind me? Okay, there he goes. I'm just doing it.
May I sit at the table because of my hearing impairment? I have to read lips.
There.
Thank you.
Got it. So, for example, a business like Island Ventures hauls a boat up, diesel line breaks or hydraulic line breaks, and dumps 50 gallons of fuel or hydraulic fluid. As I've been explained to me, general liability insurance will not cover that cleanup. Now, let's face it, the cleanup's not that extensive anyway, but I mean, how does the council feel about that?
I guess we'd have to discuss that when this board brings a recommendation to the council. I think that's where we're at.
Yeah, because I mean, it's the marine. You know, the Wrangell thing. I can easily go in and change wherever it says Wrangell, change it to Petersburg. There's a couple of other places I've asked Flo to come back because it specifically talks about things in, you know, related to fees and that we have to customize to match Petersburg. But that insurance piece is the key. Is if the council is, you know, they're okay with those three insurance, which is just general liability, then we're done.
Kurt?
I've only got one thing to add to that, and I called my insurance broker for pollution insurance because I wanted to know whether or not I'm covered on the beach. I'm covered in the water, and so that call went in over a week ago, and I followed up that call a couple of days later, and I'm still waiting to hear from London as to whether or not they would cover me if I was on the beach and had a spill. So apparently, this is much more trickier than just me dumping a 5-gallon bucket over in the harbor, paying $1,000, maybe paying the fee to the Coast Guard for telling them that I spilled, you know, and then they pick up the rest, depending on whatever it costs, up to $1 million. So anyway, I have not heard back from them whether or not I would be covered, even if I did have pollution insurance on the beach.
You know, one of the challenges, and you know, I was asked to call Seward, you know, and you know, they're pretty tight on how they do things there. You know, I asked them 4 questions. You know, are upland businesses working on boats required to carry pollution or maritime liability insurance? Yes, everyone who works on public-owned land must be insured and name the city as additional insured. It goes on. All vessel owners must provide such insurance before we haul their vessels out. You know, do you require maritime liability policies for all the boats that dock at the harbor? Yes. I mean, it goes on to explain. I mean, and that's, I think, what the council's trying to put their hands around, is other harbors are starting to require this. And again, it's their decision on how they want to administer this.
Now, Steve,
Yeah,
what harbor document are you reading?
this is Seward.
Seward.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, and they admittedly said it's a hassle and a half. I mean, you know, it's an administrative nightmare because literally every boat that docks there has to have, and they've got to have a piece of paper in their office before they let them dock.
Yeah.
And again, I'm just basing this on what their harbor master said. I don't, you know,
First
know
Dave,
anything
and
of
then
it.
John.
I spoke with John Long and Griffin McLean this morning about my policy too, and it sounded like my boat was covered on land as well as in water, but only for accidental problems. Now, if I had a vendor on there and they chopped a hydraulic hose and it spilled all over the ground, it would sound like that would be construed as accidental. So we're going to have to really keep our eyeballs open as to how things are phrased and what exactly, like he was saying, it's we gotta make sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed.
And then there's the problem that you ran in with your actual pollution insurance is all the exemptions, which basically came up with no protection. So,
Right.
yeah, you
Well,
have to really
one of the things, and I, you know, kind of said this a couple times. I think that, you know, and John was 100% correct in the terminology in the lease that called for pollution insurance. I say this carefully. I can't speak for the council, but what I've heard since then, that the consensus is that the terminology that we put in the lease was wrong. We weren't asking for pollution insurance. We were asking for marine liability insurance. The difference between the two is long-term contamination versus source point specific to an incident. I believe the council was worried about incident-based, not long-term contamination, although I can't speak for the council. So pollution insurance, you're correct. That's the long-term contamination issue, and you're going to have one hell of a hard time finding somebody to write that policy. I mean, it's not easy, and there's going to be tons and tons of exemptions to it. Marine liability insurance is apparently easy to come by and not that expensive. And again, I'm basing this on what John Long said. So that's a city council level decision. Are you worried about some form of protection that says 25 years from now, a claim comes up and there's going to be some form of policy that says we can go down and clean everything up? That's going to be really expensive, hard to get, and will probably kill business.
That's not my impression.
Okay, if you're talking about source point, very specific, the boat's hauled up, something happens, and you got 50 gallons of diesel on the ground. You know, the impression I get is the cost to clean that up is, just don't worry about it. I mean, if best, a couple of shovelfuls of gravel, you're done, and we call it a day. You know, I suppose a bigger boat pollutes a bigger area. Maybe there's an issue. On the uplands, I just don't know that this comes into play very often. I mean, it's going to be cheaper to shovel it up and clean it up and put some lime on it or whatever, and we're done. You know, the bigger issue is probably in the harbor. You know, I asked Glow about, like a derelict vessel or something, boat turns over, because the city currently, the impression I get, we end up being responsible for going in and cleaning it all up. And that's where it goes back to, if the boats have insurance and the city's named, we can go after insurance. Probably doesn't apply to somebody who's just left their boat and walked away from it. But anyway, that's the kind of back and forth that when I was looking at it.
John and then Kurt.
Steve answered my question, but my lease does require pollution insurance, very specific.
Yeah, you're right,
policy.
and I think that's
And-
wrong words.
And at an earlier council meeting, Harbor Master DeBoer did advise the council that the city of Seward does not require pollution insurance. But they may have changed.
Here's the email. The guy that sent it to me was Mac Funk. And I started off with Jim Hunt, who's their city manager, who forwarded it to Mac, who evidently is their harbor master. And this was dated December 23rd is when he responded to me.
But are they requiring both marine liability and
No,
pollution insurance?
marine liability insurance.
Okay, that's,
Specific to that.
yeah.
And that seemed, like I said, that's why I said the terminology we've gotten kind of messed around with. Again, I cannot speak for the council, but my impression is what we've been talking about all along is marine liability insurance, not pollution insurance, which is the long-term contamination type issue. But that's just my assumption.
Okay, Kurt and then Ed.
Real quick, I've been on the harbor board now for many years, and I don't even know how many years, but it's over 10. I know that, and we had to be corrected ourselves here. So I wanted to make this public that there is no such thing as a derelict vessel.
Okay.
It's a delinquent vessel. Because one man's trash is another man's
Fair
treasure.
enough.
We
using
tried to-
Glow's
we
words,
tried-
but-
we tried to do that years ago. We tried to get rid of the delinquent boats. The city attorney came back and said, you can't get rid of delinquent boats because there's no such thing as delinquent boats. Now, or derelict boats. Delinquent boats, yes. Derelict, or delinquents.
Fair enough. Thank you.
You get the idea.
Okay, Ed.
So for Seward, each harbor has a unique situation. Back in the late 80s when the oil spill happened, a lot of business people came, made their millions of dollars. Then they left their boats there, and the harbors had to deal with them, and people walked away from them. So I'm sure that's why boats sank, and I'm sure that's why they wanted the insurance.
Could be.
So, and as far as the harbor's involvement in any boat sinkings, we're not liable. It's the owners is liable for that. We will stand by and watch the show. We had one boat that sank in the harbor recently, and we did the oil boom thing, and the owner took care of it.
Did the owner pay you for your time?
He reimbursed us for the oil spill equipment.
And Gloria.
Yeah, and the overtime that was charged or incurred by one of the employees, that he paid that as well.
Right.
So,
And that's,
so there's no skin off the
that's
city.
probably really the only reason that the city, if the city wanted to take it into the harbor, That's really the only reason that I could see. It would be if you're trying to offset any city expenses related to the harbor staff having to go down there and help. I mean,
I would
But-
think it would be something that would happen so often that it would be
Yeah,
a
I
big
mean,
burden.
I wouldn't think.
We've had
but-
boats sink in the past, but the reality of it is the city doesn't own the harbor, they own the floats. So the water is, that belongs to state and federal.
That's a Coast Guard issue.
Yeah, and so if something happens, somebody spills 100 gallons or 200 gallons, whatever, it's not the city's responsibility, and they're not liable. It's the Coast Guard's issue with that boat owner. So that's kind of ends in the
So,
harbor.
Mark, and
That
from
makes,
the-
that's, puts a whole different light on
I
things.
mean, that basically moves it away from individual boat restrictions back to uplands only issues.
So that's something that needs to be conveyed to the council so that they're clear on things of that nature. Something happens in the harbor, the city's not responsible or not liable unless somebody crashes into the dock. I don't know how many years it's been. We've had very few accidents. Biggest accidents that have happened in the harbor have been from icebergs, and they've done the most damage. And the city's got insurance for that. So, anyway, yeah, Don.
Just a point of clarification, then, that's water related when you say accidents happen. What about the marineways where boats have been treated for years on those skids and treated, scrape paint, whatever? What about the ground there? Is that
Under the grids.
responsibility of the city?
Well, I'm sure that's city property, and the city would be liable for that if there was a Superfund site or claimed to be some sort of massive cleanup. But, the same thing at the shipwrights on those leases there. There's a lot of stuff on the ground, and that's going to have to go away. That's one of the reasons why we're going this direction is because we need to start hauling boats out, and we're going to have to get away from the grids. But right now, the state and the state DEC, they know that these grids are still being used, and they know that this stuff is down there. But it's unrealistic to just go to a city and say, okay, I'll stop on that, and everybody needs to haul out. You need to have a travel lift and all that without the state having to fund some of that stuff. So it's going to be a progression. But for now, from what I understand, is the property underneath the grids is city property because it's above mean low. And we're going to be liable for the cleanup of that if there is such a thing. But I would imagine if the state is going to go down that road, which that's where we're all headed, there'd be some sort of help to, probably federal monies to help clean it up. But I'm just
We would
guessing.
hope so.
Well, they're the ones that installed them in the first place. And then it was only just been a few years since they gave them to us, everything. They said, okay, now it's all yours.
Well,
they
and-
can't now just give us a lemon and go, oh, by the way.
And the impression I get, and you guys are smarter than I am about this, is that the Tier 1 grant program, which was supposed to be the state's version of helping us maintain the harbors, won't include things like the grids. So, in a sense, the state gave us the liability, and as of yet has not come up with a funding mechanism that we can apply for that would allow us to fix the problem. Doesn't mean they wouldn't down the road. But I don't, I hate the grid piece. We are not going to, to say it like it is, there's no way the city can get insurance that would now cover the cost of going back and cleaning that up. When I did make some phone calls related to what I'll call contamination insurance, pollution insurance, long-term stuff. And reality is if somebody's going to do that, they want to come in and do tests first and prove that the ground is clean prior to writing a policy. Obviously, that's not going to work, and so you're not going to get anybody to insure the grids that would pay to clean that up.
Right.
Yeah. And I don't think the state's asking us to do that either.
I'm
Not when you
not
look at all
seeing
the
any
communities-
documentation.
Yeah, not when you look at all the communities out west and even locally within 50 miles of Juneau that are still dumping raw sewage on the beach.
Yeah,
So,
I'm not seeing any of that.
I think a few flakes is.
Yeah, Don, do you have?
And just a follow-up line of thought on the material that's in the harbor and that what I've heard from reports from below and talking at the council level, that the material that would come out of dredging, for example, is considered contaminable and would have to be disposed upland. And so we're gonna contaminate the upper ground with that, and then the water coming off of that, we're gonna have to treat coming back. And it just seems like it's a convoluted process, but what what I think that the harbor board and the council committee should be considering is, if it is, how do you treat it? Could it be used in improving any of the upland properties, such as has been spoken of by the Pishner Rudder site, where Rick is working currently on surveying out in there, where that field could be considered to be put back in a contained area lined, and rather than having to deal with it upland, could the board consider that as part of their project review?
Yeah, we've done that, and we try to do it for a containment area for the addition onto the cold storage for the drive down. We wanted to use the dredge spoils, and that wasn't acceptable. We've been down this road with the state on numerous projects, and they come in and they do sampling and say, no, it has to go upland in a containment, which seems like you're saying, it doesn't seem to make sense at all. No.
Put that in upland water,
And
and
it's
have to treat it.
it's something that, you know, DEC is that's their policy, and it's a Corps of Engineers that doesn't want that left down here, anywhere near the waterfront.
That's my understanding, so it starts at the core. I'm just wondering from the council level, you know, if that discussion shouldn't go further than maybe say the board and others to say, which is the trade-off? Upland and then have to treat it or contain it, or where it's been displaced in the water and rubber line or whatever, to come up with a solution that's more reasonable or more sensible.
Well,
I think just simply to dispose it up above and say we're gonna contain it, you still have an obligation to treat it, just like when at the airport.
Well, and
All that.
if I may, I mean, and this is just it's cursory information, I guess, because we're working on the North Harbor. You know, we've been told we're going to get the money to redo the floats, and so we're putting a little pressure on the Corps about we'd like to dredge it before we replace the floats. It makes some sense. I had a conversation with Alan Churchill, the guy at the Corps that's local enough that will be in charge of this. And interesting enough, he was thrilled when we got the permit, which we've gotten verbal approval, that we can take the dredge spoils from the North Harbor and put it in our landfill. Just thrilled to death. And if that helps the project, that may very well help us get the harbor dredged, because getting that permit / approval is one of the things that delays dredging in a major way. And so he was just absolutely thrilled that we've gotten permission to put it up there. And by the way, that's going to cost the city about $250,000, because the Corps won't pay to get rid of it.
Right.
So we've got a whole nother figure out funding, but and this is the other piece that makes no sense. And DEC is happy because we've got a metals pile up there in the landfill, and we're going to use the dredge spoils to cover up that metal pile, and they're just thrilled to death. I mean, evidently they don't seem to care about the runoff. I mean, so anyway, I mean, I don't claim to understand. But
No, I don't think any of us understand the logic behind that, but that's what it is. Mark,
Those
do you
are
have
the
something?
rules you have to follow. I mean, what can you do?
and for the sake of getting the North Harbor done, this became the path of least resistance that could get it done the quickest.
Sue, did you have something?
Yeah, if we can go back on track to the insurance issue for just a second, I'll offer a few things. Eddie's totally right on. The only reason Seward has all this is because after Exxon Valdez, what happened? They reacted because the city paid, and the people had a fit and said, let's stop this. They're the most stringent harbor in the state. Second of all, Wrangell doesn't have any requirement at all for any boat that gets hauled to have insurance. Their requirement is strictly for vendors, contractors who use a site. Their yard have to have liability, auto, and workers' comp if they have employees. No mention of pollution. Third, John's lease absolutely was discriminatory in that he was the only one that had pollution. Fourth, if you have a pollution policy, which I'm going to say very few people have pollution policies, there shouldn't be any distinction at all in the water or on the land if you have a sudden and accidental dispersal of a pollutant. Where the question comes up is if I've got a 55-gallon drum of gas or oil or whatever on my boat,
which causes the leak, and not a hydraulic line integral to my vessel, that becomes questionable. If John's hauling my boat, he drops it and there's a pollution event, if he doesn't have pollution coverage, there's no coverage for John. If I don't have pollution coverage, there's no coverage for me. Requiring the boat owners, anybody tied up here, to have liability, never gonna happen here in Petersburg, Alaska. I mean, it's just not gonna happen. Private marinas down south have the option and are requiring that. You remember that Gig Harbor deal a few years back where this boat caught that boat, that boat, that boat, that boat, and all these other boats said, hey, it wasn't my fault, and we all go back and say, this guy started the fire, he needs to pay for all of us. That's why private harbors have the option to be able to do that. Public harbors down there, if you're using their public harbor commercially for your own financial gain, they're all requiring proof of general liability coverage. Same thing that Wrangell does, same thing that Halibut Point Marine, same thing that Seward, same thing that Juneau is all requiring. It gets way too complicated with all these terms, as Steve tried to mention. General liability, marine liability, P&I, pollution, and very few people understand the use of the terms, but they all interrelate. But the pollution element, the city doesn't carry it, you know, for themselves, so why John is singled out to have to carry it in the past was another issue. I'm gonna repeat myself that you'll never get all the boat owners in Petersburg to buy it, and on this chart which said less than 18 feet, nobody's gonna sell you $25,000 worth of coverage. I think Mike or Kurt wanted to, he said, you don't just walk in and say, I need insurance for 5 days while my boat's hauled out. It doesn't work that way. But if you go back and think about automobile liability insurance, which is mandatory, why? It's because people need to be responsible for themselves. And if my vessel has a pollution event today, I have made the financial risk decision to either buy a pollution policy or not. In some cases, if you're in a pool, recently they said you have to. So most people only buy it if they're forced to. If the city of Petersburg becomes the one that's forcing our vessels who are moored here or want to use an upland facility, boom, people are going to go because they're going to financially assume risk that they don't think they have at this point. That's entirely up to them. The state got involved though for automobile, which is a different issue. More people have them. Lastly, there is such thing as a derelict vessel. There is Black's Law Dictionary. As a matter of fact, Kurt, I just mailed it to Glow this morning.
Did you? According to the city attorney at the time, he said we could not deem a boat a derelict and then get rid of it. They said that we could not. Remember that, Eddie?
I'm not talking about that. I got it right here, the definition of derelict vessel. It's a specific term.
Oh.
I don't believe we have any derelict vessels in our harbor.
Right.
We may have whatever you said.
Delinquent. That's in payment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the only
We
reason
don't
we get rid
have
of them.
derelicts.
Okay.
Wrangell also has gone through the pain of trying to figure out, should they require everybody that ties up there to provide proof of insurance because of a derelict vessel, which went over and fell onto a harbor board member's boat and caused damage, and that guy didn't have insurance, so then why didn't we require everybody to have insurance, blah, blah, blah. Juneau will give you a credit off your moorage if you provide proof of insurance to them for the boat. You know, ultimately, should everybody have insurance? Sure, unless you financially are going to take or have the money to clean up after you spill 15 gallons somewhere, or if somebody slips on your boat or whatever. So there's just a little bit of.
Okay, well, thank you, Sue. That.
So what was the definition of derelict?
Derelict,
Should I
when
just see?
it comes
Maybe I
to
could just see it, or is it just? Can we
a boat or
paraphrase it?
vessel found entirely deserted or abandoned on the sea without hope or intention of recovery or return by the master or crew, whether result from a wreck, accident, necessity, or voluntary abandonment. When a vessel, without being abandoned, is no longer under the control or direction of those on board, as where part of the crew are dead and the remainder are physically or mentally incapable of providing for their own vessel. She is said to be quasi-derelict. When the crew have left their vessel temporarily with the intention of returning to resume possession, she is not technically a derelict, but is what is maybe termed as quasi-derelict.
All right.
So all of us have derelict boats
Sure.
when
We leave them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like now.
Is the board's opinion that we should maybe entertain a motion to change the wording, or recommend the council change the wording of the lease for John to reflect that he carry liability and not pollution insurance?
I don't know.
Hey, Dave, would you make a motion to maybe adopt Wrangell's policy? Because then that would pretty much clear it up, because they've already invented the wheel.
That sounds good to me.
Okay.
I so move.
Well,
Well, no, I didn't make the motion, you are.
question for Sue. So Wrangell doesn't require insurance. Does the city have insurance there for liability and whatnot?
back up, what do you mean by Wrangell doesn't require insurance?
Well, that's what you said.
Wrangell doesn't require, if you're gonna haul,
Okay.
let's use a Priest Point, I can pin on that boat. If you're gonna haul the Priest Point, they could give a flying rip if the Priest Point has insurance. But if you are going to weld on the Priest Point at their facility,
Okay.
you, as a vendor of any type, and that was a whole huge issue too. You, who may use the facility every day, versus me, I sell paint. And I'm gross $5,000 a year, but I carry my paint onto that property. Am I too required to carry $1 million liability insurance?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to go there.
Can I go one step further with Joseph's questioning? Let's say the Priest Point does go up there and he knocks over that 55-gallon drum of gasoline on the deck and it spills on the beach, and you guys don't have pollution insurance. Does the city of Wrangell assume that responsibility at that time, or does the Priest Point continue to assume that responsibility and it comes out of your pocket?
Well, I have got to believe that if I cause the accident, it's my fault, period.
Right.
I mean, that's where, when no one has insurance, and you're like, well, it was on your land, therefore you're responsible.
That's what the city's worried about.
Right, and that's
One
what
of the reasons
lease
that-
agreement
yeah.
covers? Or, and this is kind of like insurance.
No, it has
in a way.
nothing to do about pollution at all in Wrangell.
Okay.
And the Wrangell Harbor doesn't carry any pollution. The city of Wrangell doesn't. Nobody cares about pollution until the Coast Guard's breathing down your back.
Yeah,
And the
Glenn.
only,
Does the city of Wrangell, in their haul out, in their travel lift, they must have general liability if they drop your vessel or damage it and it pollutes or doesn't pollute, they must have liability to cover that.
they have, if they damage your vessel, they've got coverage for it. If they drop your boat, if you pollute as a result of that dropping, no, pollution is always something separate.
And the Wrangell does not cover, if they drop the vessel and rupture a tank, you mean to tell me they're not covered for pollution?
They are not covered for pollution. Pollution is always excluded. There are some P&I policies that throw in pollution as part of that limit. There are some of those. Those are, I don't even want to get into why.
On
some of them
individual
have-
boats you're talking
But
about.
let me give you for instance, and please jump in if I have any of this wrong. We haul a boat out of the water. John does to work on it. In the process of doing that, we've adopted the Wrangell policy here, and John's got general liability insurance. Something happens, and we now have fuel on the ground. The only way for the city to get that cleaned up is what I'm hearing is John has no liability to clean it up. The boat owner doesn't have insurance, so can just basically walk away unless the city files a lawsuit and goes after the boat owner. By the way, this is exactly what Seward said to me, as well as a couple other harbors that said that's why they require it, so that they don't have to go through hiring an attorney and suing somebody, which is a major expense for the city. In other words, having that insurance policy with the city named makes it far quicker for the city to recover the cost to clean it up than it would be otherwise. That's a city council decision.
Right.
I mean, they have to decide if they want that liability or not.
Under that scenario, though, if you had to hire an attorney to sue somebody because they didn't have insurance, that is gonna be part of the settlement too, so don't
You
say
assume
that,
so,
don't,
yeah.
don't say that the city's gonna be out that money. It's just gonna be a hassle, to try to
Fair
get the
enough.
money.
You're right. Fair
So,
enough.
I mean, it's not like we're gonna ever be holding the bag, is what I'm getting at, I mean, I personally have insurance out the wazoo, and I just read one of my insurance policies today that said I have trailer insurance. If it gets dropped off a trailer while it's being trailered, which I'm not sure which one of my boats would ever be trailered, but I'm insured for that, that kind of stuff, so.
Throw out around these terms, but I'm still not clear that there's any policy John can get that's gonna cover pollution damage.
That's
So-
the impression I'm getting,
So
is that there is none.
why require any liability coverage?
Well, general liability is one of those things that if he
If he drops you.
Great, but
Correct.
what does that do to protect the city? Why do we care if John has general liability?
You want
He-
John to have general liability.
Yeah.
Okay.
You,
he's operating on a piece of city property, he hurts somebody,
I
I mean,
trip
the
over
city
his
can be named in a
toolbox.
lawsuit. Yeah.
Yeah, John?
I trip over his hose.
I think I wouldn't care if John had liability or not, but I bet you John would want liability.
Yeah, I mean, there's a
That's
certain
what I'm
amount of
getting at,
that.
because
Do
he's
you
gonna
already
assume
have it?
that liability, I'm sure.
Yeah, John, go ahead.
Yeah, of course I have it.
Yeah.
The other protection that the city has is the actual lease that I have here. And that lease has 14 different paragraphs that specifically address who's going to be responsible if I spill that 50 gallons of fuel. And so there's no, the lease could not be more protective to the city. There's no insurance that I'm referring to here, but I annotated all the different paragraphs that address that, and so it's very, very well addressed in the lease.
John, does that lease, I think they already have a general liability
Yes.
insurance requirement in it? I mean,
Yes.
so, guys, I'm speaking to city council members now, you can argue, just take the pollution insurance out of our existing lease, and we don't even need to do the wrangle process, which is basically saying the same thing.
Yeah, well, that's
I
up
mean,
to the
I'm
council.
just,
And we could draw up scenarios for all sorts of things, and I get back to the same thing, is there's a risk factor in everything we do, and we have to take it into realistic terms, it's been working for 100 years, and, it seems to be working okay. I know that the city needs to be protected, and I think it's already there in the lease that they're pretty protected, and I don't think we need to go down this other insurances and stuff for the vessels. But I may be, off on that. But I think it's working. Yeah, Mark, did you have?
Well, I'm just looking at if John has liability insurance, then he does, but if someone's painting, welding, fiberglassing, or whatever on city property out there, and they don't have the liability, who's responsible if they cause someone to get hurt?
great, so that's where this is where you're at, that's where the wrangle thing comes in, so there's a reason to have that. Yeah.
So, Dave, do you want to make that motion, or do you want me to make the motion that we adopt? But then we can have a discussion, John. What do you want to do?
Go right ahead.
Well, then I'd like to make a motion that we adopt Wrangell's harbor use or uplands use policy as best management practices. So,
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to adopt Wrangell's program of best management practices and lease contract outline. I guess what would have to be worked through with the city to match it up with us. But, all those in favor respond by saying aye.
aye.
All right.
All those opposed, same sign.
Mr. Chairman? I
Yes,
can deal with your leases, so I do want clarification on this. Your motion's also including to drop the pollution requirement in the leases?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that.
I'm still,
Mandate's still the liability.
Yeah, Mark, did you have something to add?
no, just see that you made a motion and was seconded, and it's not that I want to have any discussion, or you can have discussion, you already had a lot of discussion.
You
went right to a vote.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay,
sorry.
sorry, yeah.
It'll only take me 30 seconds to read over, for the sake of everybody in the audience, the protections that the city has. And there's a paragraph on use of premises. It requires environmental best management practices, and it is an attachment to the lease of 40 pages of details of what those are. It requires compliance with law. To pollute is against the law, and so it enforces limited use as required under the use of the premises. So it's going back to the previous paragraph, enforcing it. It requires compliance with ADEC regulations. There's a full dedicated page, which is too long to read, on environmental and water quality protection. Next page is a separate additional paragraph requiring avoidance of pollutions. It guarantees the lessor's right of entry. That's really the most important thing of all. The city can come in there, the harbor department can come in there and keep an eye on things and poke around as much as they want at any time. It requires, of course, a comprehensive general liability insurance. There's a paragraph on default if there's failure to comply with any provision. It gives details on how it covers the city, it protects the city. It has cancellation procedures if there is unlawful use. In other words, if there's anything that I'm not doing correctly, it details how that lease can be immediately canceled. There's another paragraph, an indemnification of the city against all claims and cleanups. There's another paragraph on attorney's fees that are covered concerning environmental pollution. The lease itself is a 5-year term. At the rate we're going, the lease is going to be up by the time we get the sale. So you're pretty protected there. The lease is not renewable, and so it's that's something that you're going to be looking at for a very long period of time.
Right.
$2 million.
Okay, Mark, do you feel clear as far as to how to convey it, and the other counselors have a clear direction that we're recommending the council go down that
I
path?
thought the chair of the harbor board would come and tune them up on that.
Well, I'm sure I'll be there.
I've got a general, I've got an idea of what we've changed and what we're asking, and I know I looked at Mr. Murgis's lease when we started that, 2 years ago, whatever. And there is a lot of coverages. I can't say how the other council members are.
Right, I'm just wondering if you follow our train of thought, and this is the third or fourth meeting we went over this.
Don't have the
insurance
pollution
thing.
insurance, but go with the liability and with the wrangle contract, which requires people working on city land to have liability insurance.
Can I ask something as well?
Okay, yeah, 1 second, Sue. Just one.
I have to agree with you 100%, Mark, and that vote came really without any discussion of what you just approved. And I'm not sure that what you approved is really what you meant, in that what I heard you approve was you approved adopting the wrangle requirements for anybody that's using city land. I'm not sure that's exactly what you meant.
Well, what I tried to add in was that we discussed this earlier, was to make it match our city's requirements as far as what we're discussed, for the past couple of months. Yeah.
So if I'm gonna start cutting hair on the Priest Point, and I'm gonna have my sandwich board in front of Petersburg Insurance, and people are gonna walk down the city-owned docks to the city-owned slip where I'm cutting hair, am I required to have $1 million liability policy listing the city of Petersburg as an additional insurance?
Well,
Doesn't the wrangle policy say commencement of any maintenance or repair activities at the wrangle maintenance facility, service center, which excludes anything floating in the harbor?
I'm not sure on that. If you're looking at it, if
I
it
mean, I'm
specifically
reading
says
it.
their haul out, then it's their haul out. I'm not sure that what you approved says only at the Scow Bay turnaround do you need insurance.
No.
Because if you don't, I'm not gonna use the Scow Bay turnaround. I'm gonna go somewhere else where I don't have to buy insurance
I think that,
as a vendor.
If you're a vendor.
if I'm a vendor.
okay.
I'll just keep doing it at the harbor. Because if you use John's lease spot then you have requirements, but any other city place you don't.
Well, unless this applied to land that Piston and Rudder leases.
I mean, I think.
I don't know if their lease is worded exactly like John's, but I would think if we mirror what Wrangell's requires for their service center, I mean, first you have to describe the boundaries of the Petersburg Marine Service Center.
There you go.
You
There
know.
you go.
And that's what we talked about a little while ago, was, Steve brought it up, that we were gonna change that policy, but use the language of the requirements for protection that the city needs on city lands that are used by the marine facility haul out, whether it's the shipwrights, John
So
Mergus.
that was your intention.
Yeah, that's what we've been discussing, and he mentioned a little bit earlier that we would have to change that policy or that requirement. Yeah, I've got like.
Well,
4
no,
copies of it.
this, what I just did is I put a little arrow or a circle next to everything that I think we need to customize to be Petersburg specific.
Yeah, it's gotta
If
match.
one of you
It's gotta
can fill in the blanks there, I'll take it from there.
I'd like to look it over a lot more closely than we have here. I mean, we can do better than just copy theirs. We should probably go through number by number
Well,
and
it's,
see if
yeah,
it
it's not
applies.
gonna match up with our cities.
So, but
you know,
a motion to
exactly.
adopt is so vague that, I was gonna abstain here, but I couldn't, I mean, we can do better than just skim it and say yes. This is a very intimate thing, and does it affect the grid? Or is it only the leased properties?
This addresses leased properties.
Okay, why isn't the grid just as much a problem for general liability?
It depends on whether you have a vendor down there, Bob. And like Sue was,
Exactly.
where Sue was headed was, if I was gonna be a vendor working in the harbor on somebody's vessel, you would be an absolute idiot not to have liability insurance. With this litigious society, you gotta be out of your skull
If you got
not to
nothing
have
to lose,
liability.
though, if you're
But
just
the
a guy
problem
who
is, if you
strokes
even have a
boats.
house in this town and a vessel in this town, you have those to lose if you foul up. I mean, that's what I don't get. You know, I mean, that's why I've got insurance out the wazoo. I mean, I've got too much to lose. I've worked too hard for all my stuff, so I'm not going to lose it. Now, if I'm going to be a vendor and I'm going to put a shingle up someplace and I'm going to start working on somebody's property that I will be liable for if it fails, I'm going to have liability insurance. That's just the way I operate. Because I'm not giving my stuff away that I've worked for to anybody when I can just pay $500 a year and cover my ass. So that's just my
Yeah, I
personal
mean-
opinion.
Should we give this to Steve then and have him kind of go through it and represent it to the board? And-
Well, I think we could all look it over
Yeah.
again and figure
We should
out, and then
work on
come
it.
back at our next meeting with the changes that we all find that we might want to include in that.
You all want a copy of the Wrangle one? I printed a
I'll provide
bunch of
copies.
copies. I've got it. I've already got it.
Yeah, I think we should have, I think we should just have a board, informal board meeting, we should look over and see,
Please.
you know.
Yeah, Sue?
One
Work
last
session.
thing too about, Kurt, if everybody thought like you, we'd never have to sell uninsured motorist coverage.
Right, you're right, Sue, but I mean, like,
And it wouldn't cost $900,
Right.
where your car insurance
Right.
costs, whatever. But
Right.
that's not what I was gonna say, but I agree. And Kurt, you said $500.
but I'm just saying.
That's fine, that's a great number, because some of these policies, you can buy them $550 or $650.
Yeah.
And it's gonna provide the general liability,
Right.
which I wanted to
Right.
point out is all that Wrangell's requiring.
Right.
Now, if you are working on my boat and you burn down my boat, your general liability is not gonna buy me a new boat. It will fix my broken leg when somebody trips over your stuff or getting off your boat if they slip. But general liability is going to protect the city and the vendor, but it doesn't provide the vendor other protection that they may need.
Right, right. Well, I suppose if you're using a hot torch, if you're gonna do something that's gonna burn down, a boat, then you're gonna have to look at whatever insurance coverage you need. I'm just saying that cutting hair or whatever
Yeah.
you're gonna do,
But that's where it gets
Yeah.
to, the city will be very reasonable by only requiring general liability. Then the option to insure you for what your actual work is a risk management decision by the individual party.
Right.
And the city has the option of not allowing people to work on specific sites without it, if they so desired.
Yeah, and the only caution I'll
I
throw
know
in
you're
there
cautioning us. So.
is that if I deliver 18 gallons of paint a year, do I have to do it? Look like Hammer Weekend, they're delivering grub to boats all the time. Now we're gonna say Hammer Weekend, you gotta list the city of Petersburg, because they use our facilities. They don't have a lease, but they use the facilities. So
Well-
it needs a little bit, like Bob said, needs a little bit
Needs
more.
some dressing up.
Yes. Yeah, Steve?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, go through that, fine tooth comb, whatever, I mean, you know, I think I can explain it to the city council, we'll keep it off the next agenda, so it gives you guys enough chance to go through this, and I think the council will be understanding of that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
we're a lot closer to getting this thing done, so.
Don?
Mr. Chairman, just a point of order, then, you've moved to adopt this, and thought that one board member said maybe we should consider reviewing it further, and so you've heard that from him, so would be a point of order that reconsideration by one of the members seconded, so that you've not
You can-
adopted it,
yeah, right.
just a housekeeping thing.
So what we'd have to do is, you'd have to rescind your second.
Or
and then-
rescind my second.
Rescind your second.
Yeah.
Consider it rescinded.
Okay, and then we'll take this under consideration and work on it to kind of, all the things we can think of that would fit our needs, then we can come back and come up with a better document, work with Steve, and then present that to the council. Does that sound good to everybody?
I've got this in an electronic format that if people want it in email, I can even email it to you, but,
Yeah.
you know, it's whatever.
I would
works.
like to have Sue involved somehow, you know, so she can describe all the different terms of, you know, insurances and stuff, so. Maybe once we discuss everything as far as we can go, maybe we could have her review it. Would you do that for us?
Absolutely.
Okay, and then just say, you know, this is, you know, you might wanna think about this and that, and then we can then look at it again before.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So if it's messed up, she's responsible?
Well, I mean, at least.
Yes, you buy insurance, and it costs me a phone call.
Errors and omissions.
Yeah,
Yeah, Rick?
yeah.
Yeah, so is this going to include all city lease land, like the shipwrights or piston rudder leases?
My recommendation, just from my perspective, is the answer is yes, but that's the council.
It's written in their lease, whether they have it or not.
Yeah.
You know, I know they have liability insurance, and
What is being talked about, not to say approved, is already in all of our standard leases anyway. So, but adding this facility use agreement that can be specific to the areas we decide to outline adds just another level to the process. I think it, you know, and so for example, if we've got leased land that's there somewhere that has nothing to do with the harbor, doesn't require this based on how you phrase things. If it's down here in the harbor, and we have to decide how to define the harbor, but it does apply. But I think it should apply to piston and rudder and anybody else that's down here near the waterfront in the harbor areas.
Yes, Sue?
I'll throw out one other thing, because I do have some clients who process their own fish, and then they take it to Seattle and send out the emails, hey, we'll be in Friday Harbor on Saturday and Sunday, Tacoma, 8 different harbors up and down the coast. Every single one of those harbors requires that they carry general liability, which lists the harbor or port facility as additional insured, which is different than their boat P&I. They're 2 different things, because from the time that person parks their car, walking down the ramps, out the dock, where they have their slip and fall, the only reason they're there is to buy fish from Mike Bangs. That's why they want them to have the general liability. Once they're on Mike's boat, it becomes Mike's P&I. Once they're 2 feet off the boat, until they get back in their car, it's
The
general
city-
liability.
The city has insurance for that.
Yes, we do.
So,
Yes,
yeah,
we do.
Dave?
Just wondering if there's anything we can do to help John right now, though. This is all good, but it's not helping his situation with the pollution requirement right away. Is there anything we can recommend to help his situation?
Well, time is of the essence, and as long as this is done in a timely manner, March 1 is always the first
So I think
activity.
we're in line to be
Okay.
done by then. We've got a couple of council meetings.
Yeah, that makes sense.
that's on January or February 3rd, I believe.
Yeah, if it's possible to It won't make Mondays, but if it's possible to.
Lastly,
Or
for me,
Tuesday.
there is a lot of concern by vessel owners of what we're discussing today. There's no promulgation of this meeting. KFSK had no idea that it was going on, and so I think we need to make sure that these meetings are, and the agenda items are promulgated.
Yeah, generally they are, and we had I think there was a lot going on in the harbor office, and the packet didn't get sent, because Gloria was leaving. It was just a lot of mix-up this time. Usually we have the meeting in the evening, but we're trying to facilitate other requirements for other organizations and stuff, so that's why we moved it to noon today, and it didn't get on the docket at KFSK and whatnot. We usually do, and that was a oversight. Apologize. Yeah, Dawn?
Excuse me. You meet normally once a month.
Yes.
Would it be possible in this particular issue to have a special meeting in a 2-week period to try to expedite this to get it done, so it could get addressed sooner than
Yeah, I think
later?
Kurt, yeah, that's what Kurt was referring to, is we would have a special gathering, or, we need to look this over as individuals, and then we could, at a later time, when like in the next week or so, we
And
can get back
advertise
together.
work session or something.
Yeah.
for your term.
Bob?
Is this in addition to John's lease that we'd be doing? Because this is a facility use agreement, not a lease.
Correct.
How is this going to help John with his lease?
When it gets to the council level, my understanding is we'll have probably 2 agenda items. One is remove the pollution insurance requirement from our standard leases. And the second agenda item would be to adopt the facility use agreement for the aforementioned areas. So it's a twofold thing. How it helps John is the minute that comes out of his lease, it's one big problem. We adopt, the city council adopts this agreement, this use agreement. That's the second part of it. And it's my understanding John's happy with the other parts of that lease, that we would be in a position to give him a new lease. For that matter, we could put all 3 of them on the same agenda if it's in the right order.
Will John be a facility user also, or just the leaser?
He'd be both.
So
He'd be in other words, he's leasing it from us, and we would ask that a facility use agreement be signed as well, as I'm understanding it.
Because if there's overlap, how would you sort that out? Some might be less or more restrictive. It sounds like his is even more restrictive in some ways.
Put a clause on this that says, if you have an existing lease with the city, that the more stringent of the 2 requirements applies.
I wonder what Don or one of those guys over in Wrangell has. Because he leases a piece of, the area. Because he's actually got a painting shed over there that he's. I wonder if we could get a lease agreement from the city of Wrangell, just to look over.
Yeah.
Not that we
Yeah,
adopt everything.
That's it.
But no, does Don sign this? Who's ever leasing dirt from
Yeah.
the facility, that's
In that
it?
marine area,
Okay,
that's it.
that's it.
Yeah, Dawn.
Okay, yeah.
Just a question for Steve. What would be the ramification for the possibility of putting on the agenda, this coming week's agenda, to remove the pollution requirement ahead of all this other work?
We can definitely do it.
Facilitate, and you've heard this recommendation from the board, and I'm hearing that it's been repeated again and again, to alleviate some of the concerns that John may have and other fishermen, would just simply at this next meeting remove the pollution requirement, then pick up the other subjects and address the adoption of more modified use of the facilities, et cetera. Would that be out of order in your opinion?
Not from my perspective, but that's up to the city council.
Yeah, Mark?
Currently, is your lease not active, John?
Correct.
Okay, so even if we remove the pollution insurance, we'd have to redo the lease before John could start using the facility again, I guess.
Correct. Yeah, we would have to, if we do a lease.
So one requires both to make, accommodate John, I don't know, just so.
Comes first the chicken or the egg, but to Don's point, yes, we could put an agenda item to remove the pollution insurance requirement from our existing leases. There are 5 of them, by the way, that have that requirement currently in them. Yes, city council can approve to do that, and then come back at a later date and approve something like this.
So,
Okay, anything else on this unfinished business, the pollution insurance discussion?
May I suggest that you put this in email format, in
I
the
have
Word
it.
document, and
I do.
then people could participate more openly,
I've
freely.
got it electronically. I can send it to whoever wants it. In fact, I've got it electronically, and I've already made changes to it to change a lot of it to Petersburg. I can, if people want to write their email address down, I'm happy to send it to you.
Yeah, why don't you pass it around, that'd be good. Okay, moving along here, if there's nothing else on this pollution insurance topic, we could, yeah.
I hate to do that. But who are the 5 leases that we now require that for?
GCI, Piston and Rudder, Island Ventures, Humane Society, and what was it? Oh, Cold Storage.
Weekend Enterprises.
Not that was given to me. Remember, this was something that was added.
They were private too, they might carry it.
Yeah, but the city's got a bunch of outstanding leases that hadn't expired, and then we had 5 newer ones that requirement was put in as they came up, and that was just 5.
2006 forward.
Thanks,
How much trouble are the rest of these places having on paying the pollution insurance?
Majority.
It's never come up.
Okay, just curious, that's all.
I don't know that they have it. We've never pushed the issue.
Oh, okay, oh, okay.
So, I mean, be very clear about how that, I'm not saying they have it, I'm
Okay.
just saying that,
Okay.
Yeah, it's a requirement.
But it was a requirement, but you don't, but you,
Since 2006.
oh, okay. Okay, I'll let it go with that.
Okay,
I can't speak to that other than I just,
okay, we're going down to number 8, new business. Recommendation for city council to pass a resolution supporting the Alaska Legislature fully fund the FY13 Municipal Harbor Facility Grant Program.
they did that. They
Okay,
did a great job on that.
okay, we had unanimously recommended the council pass this resolution, and they did that. Is that what I gather?
The legislature did, in fact, fully fund it. I mean, still, if you,
The governor's budget.
the government put it
Yeah, the
through.
legislature hasn't
Yeah.
done it.
We were told by Senator Stedman that helps you that the chances of it being changed are slim to none. But in other words, meaning it's going to stay fully funded.
Right, but what I think this is getting at is recommending that the legislature do that, not just the governor's budget,
Sure.
but make sure that it follows through. And that's one thing that the council might consider sending another letter to all the legislators that are going to be dealing with this issue, that we reiterate our position statewide. So that was the reason why we put this in here, because it is in the governor's budget, but it hasn't passed the legislature. So anyway, is that?
I don't think it would hurt to, as much, I wouldn't call it pressure, as much repeating ourselves as we can to keep it in there, to have the legislature keep the governor's budget like it is. You know, that's basically what you're asking, right?
Right, I'm just looking for, do we want to make a motion that the council send a continuation to the legislature, that we feel very strongly that this should stay in the governor's budget and it should be passed, ratified by the legislature? Is that something we need to do, or is that something the council's going to do anyway, or?
I don't know if it was something I don't know if
Hadn't
it
planned on
hasn't
it.
been on an agenda.
What do you guys
I
think
know
is
it's
probably
been communicated to, well, Senator Stedman, and I'm sure Peggy Wilson it'll be our local delegation, or our districts, our representatives. Well, and then our new ones, well, Dennis Egan and Beth Gertula, I'm sure they'll be getting the same information that Senator Stedman and Gertula. As far, I don't know what to recommend. I mean, it doesn't hurt.
Yeah, well, it's up to the board here,
It's
if
up
you
to
want
you
to
guys.
send that on as a recommendation to the council to follow up with another letter to the,
Get Glow to get a resolution put together, and we can get it in front of the council to vote on.
so
If that's what your board wants to
we
do.
probably don't even need to make a motion on that, or do we need to make a motion to recommend the staff drop a resolution to send on to the council.
Be the best if it came from the harbor board, probably.
Okay.
So
I'd
moved.
entertain. Okay, so moved is second.
Second, that's it.
Okay, great. All those, any discussion on, any more on that issue? Okay, then, what we're doing is we made a motion to, have the harbor staff drop a resolution to follow through, the city council to recommend to the legislature to definitely, fully fund this, grant 50/50 match program for harbor maintenance and building. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Okay, passes. Okay, good. Thanks. Drive down dock mitigation option. It says, like, Ed, did you want to give a little bit of background on what you know about what Kate at PN&D explained?
I don't have the detail.
Ed, would you like me to do it? I mean, if,
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I,
Yeah, that'd be
I think
great.
that's okay. Drive down dock, we did testing down there to make sure, what's the status of the material, so we could get some ideas on what's the best way to handle the project. We got a confirmation that the best way for us to do stuff is us to do what's called a mitigation, meaning they set aside if we mess around with 1 acre of land, we've got to do something with 2 acres of land, and that seemed to be the best alternative. We could pay $64,000 in cash. We could go mitigate another area, or we could set aside, which was an interesting dynamic, land and say we'll never touch it. That seemed to be the cheapest because it didn't cost us anything. We've identified some areas that the city already owns that is unbuildable, and it's been run by the council. In kind of just an informal part of my report, but that's the direction we're currently going. Literally just set aside a conservation easement to make up for any disturbance we do with the drive down dock facility. So what allows us to do is really doesn't cost us anything, and it gets us closer to having the permit to do anything in the drive down dock. So it doesn't affect the harbor. The land that we're talking about is either around the fire station or around the City Creek Dam in areas that we wouldn't build anyway. And there's about 90 acres, we've been told, around the City Creek area that gives us the chance to continue to do this for some time as we need to do projects in the harbor. So it's we are moving forward on that as we speak.
Great. Okay, I think we need to back up just a little bit and let Ed give us a little rundown on the harbor master report. I suppose everybody's read pretty much, but
You want me to just
May
read it pretty
highlight
much, or?
you can just highlight what you feel is important.
See, on a break. Oh yeah. We obtained the new 4-wheeler for snow removal. We've been using it off and on, and from what snowfall we've had, working really good.
We'll be storing that at it.
In a container van in the middle harbor, locked up. There's just a couple of us been using it so far, just Ben and I. But nobody else seemed to want to hop on it.
So when you use it, you just drive it down whatever harbor, just on the reef road?
Very carefully ride it down the road. With a helmet.
Uh-huh.
Life jacket?
I've just been doing the approaches, just blowing the snow off the docks. Security camera update. Jerry at Ace Electronics received almost 100% of the equipment, been configuring the cameras. We've been going over the electricity for wiring, placement of the cameras. He's pretty close to doing this. He'd like to begin installing the hardware probably in a week. And he'd like to have a completion at the end of the month. He has, pretty much till end of May to do this, so we just want to get it done and get things configured on how we're going to monitor everything. I ordered signs. you know, a bunch of times we're gonna be placing up. I haven't discussed with Glow about it, but figured at every approach there'll be a sign saying that, surveillance, place areas monitored by surveillance, by the garbage dumpsters also, and by the waste oil dumpsters, I recommend. Also, what else? I've briefly mentioned it to Glow about a fine system. I don't know, you know, whatever amount we decide to do should be somewhat significant for people offending the dumpsters, you know, people, non-harbor users dumping in the dumpsters, or people abusing the waste oil where they're just throwing trash in there, or leaving 5-gallon cans outside and not disposing it properly. So we'll have the cameras available for identifying the people and maybe mail them a ticket or a
And
citation.
you might check with Carl on that. There might already be a city ordinance in the sanitation area that covers
Yeah,
that issue. May already be there.
yeah, okay. So that's what I've been dealing with there. The crane dock, we have a broken piling. I just recently, it's on the front by the big crane. There's one piling there that's broke. It's the pivot point that most boats tie up to. It's got, if you're down there, you'll see it all flagged off. So we have a estimate, I forgot to bring it, from Tamaco to redo these pilings. I think he's going to pull one and pull and replace one. Then also in the contract is to set up some type of scaffolding underneath the crane so we can work on them. We need to, there's no access under there. It's pretty difficult to get under there, tighten the bolts or change them. We've been needing to do this for a few months now. So he's going to make up some kind of a scaffolding that we can get under there to do maintenance. And also part of the bolt replacement, because the bolts, over their time, the bolts have stretched and they might break here. So we need to get that done here shortly before Martinson takes off to Craig or somewhere on Prince of Wales for the summer. He put in a bid. He had alternatives for steel piling, wood piling. And for what we want to do that I mentioned would be about 14,300-ish. So that will be in the supplemental. I emailed Jody and haven't got any feedback on that yet. So that's where we're at on that. And that's about it there.
Is there any time frame for that, or is it not going to happen before this crab season probably? When they're looking
Well,
at heavy crab?
we have, probably when Jimmy gets back from Hawaii, and it'll happen very quickly after that.
Okay, good.
So, I don't know the time.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Any questions for Ed? Okay, there's just a couple of discussion items, and we've pretty much gone over these at length in the past, but there is some, maybe somebody's come up with some new ideas on the approach possible uses for the drive down, where we talked, we have to set aside some of it for some public use. And we talked about it at our last meeting, and then we just wanted to touch base and see if there's any new ideas out there. Make sure you write them down and give them to Glow or Ed and Steve as well, so we're all kind of aware of the possible uses for that place and something that's going to match up with the grant funding that we have for it. So, anyway, yeah.
What are the constraints on the uses? What are they looking for again? I forgot.
Something to justify it.
Yeah,
Well-
but I mean, is public use going to be,
Well,
park bench or?
exactly. And we're talking about maybe even a covered area, and it doesn't have to be specifically for tourists. It could be, we talked about a possible reader board that explained types of fishing like we have on the Harbor Wall office. just a covered area for people to stand waiting for a bus to come and pick them up if they're, tourists are waiting, or just any number of things. So that's where we're just kind of brainstorming, trying to come up with some ideas that we could afford to put in place that would enhance the drive down approach. So
Is there a dollar value constraint?
I'm not sure on that. I think there's a percentage
Like
that
3%
would
or something? Or?
yeah, like for artwork, how we do that when you do something. I'm sure there's some amount that we probably need to look into, but I don't know that dollar amount. But anyway, it's something that we need to keep thinking about, and I think it's a ways down the road for sure. But the longer we think about it, the better ideas we'll come up with. So, and the other thing is we did have a work session with the council, and I think most everyone was there. And that's about it. I don't know. Does anybody have anything to add? Ideas you want to bring up for the next meeting?
Should we make a time and date right now for our work session that we're going to have with anybody who's interested?
Yeah, I think that'd be a great idea. See, we could probably arrange next week and just do a short noontime thing.
Upstairs at the Harbor Shack.
Yeah, or even in a conference room, depending on, I'm sure the Harbor Shack would be available.
You're talking a work session.
Yeah, work session for
To look this-
for just the Harbor
Yeah.
Board and anybody else that's interested in getting together. What do you guys think? Good day,
Same time?
next week at
Like,
Wednesday?
don't we have to advertise like just only 2 days in advance, I think? 3 days.
We have it out. Get Ed, maybe you can do that Friday, have it sent out for next Wednesday meeting. Does that work for everybody? I don't know exactly what's going on next Wednesday. I'm sure the Board of Fish meetings all day, but noontime would be a good time for.
Yeah, noontime, we'll take a break, so we wouldn't miss a whole lot there.
Yeah, that's not gonna take us long.
We're here cooking the scallops.
Oh, okay.
Don't miss that.
Right.
High point.
Well, let's see, so that's next week, huh?
You gonna
I'm
follow
just
around?
open for.
Yeah, I thought that was
Thursday.
Thursday.
Being a smart aleck.
I know there was some Board of Fish thing on Thursday, I think.
It goes from Saturday till when?
Okay.
Does anybody have any idea? It's usually a week, so Saturday to Friday.
Yes, Kathy.
Mike, if you guys are planning on taking action on that document, you should schedule it as a special meeting
Right, so
and address that subject, and that way you can make the recommendation and be done with it.
Okay, so it wouldn't be a work session. We would do it as an official meeting so that we could actually vote on it and move forward with it.
Okay.
Can we do it in our board meeting place because of the size restraints? Can we do it in the Harbor boardroom if we?
You can. We
Yeah.
try to record when we can, but when we can't, if this room's busy,
Yeah.
we let you know that.
Yeah, we can
The
take,
notice
somebody
is gonna have to
take
say that
notes.
when it's around.
You gonna
I'm
do
just
it
thinking
on
this
we
might
could,
not
we,
be
we could
available.
always have another special meeting that we could call after we've brainstormed, over this. I mean, what if, that's kind of what I was thinking. It's just kind of a work session. We brainstorm over what we think, and then, because then it has to be looked at. We can't vote on it unless Sue wants to sit through the whole thing. But I'd like to send it over to Sue and let her say, well, that's unreasonable, or that's reasonable, or that's insurable, that's not insurable, blah, blah, if that's how we're going to do it, you know what I mean? I mean,
So
'cause he's answered a lot of
what he's saying
questions.
is we have a work session just to work amongst ourselves and figure out a document.
Yeah.
Then bring it back to our regular meeting to vote on it and approve it after it's finalized, and then send it on to the council.
So we have a special meeting anytime, as long as we advertise 3 days in advance.
What do you guys think?
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
So like if we have a meeting on, say, Friday at noon or whatever, then we could then have maybe on, so we're not gonna miss it, before the 3rd of February, right? We have to have a special meeting that we could then present it to the public, and then we could then vote on it. So something like that time frame.
So when do you guys just want to
That
have
makes
a,
better sense.
Yeah.
because the work session would
Yeah,
generate questions, that's for sure.
sure, yeah, right.
Yeah.
That somebody's gonna need to answer. I mean, because I'd like to say, there's some things that Sue brought up, some very valid points here that, we gotta make sure that we're not, gonna enforce liability insurance on Hammered Week on delivering my groceries down to the boat.
yeah. So is that what you guys want to do, is just have a work session
I would
and work
prefer
through
that.
it, and then call a special meeting, then pass it on to the council?
Yep.
That's what I'm
Before the
getting.
3rd of February. So however that works out.
Okay, well, when do you guys wanna have this little work session?
Let's try it next Friday.
I'm not sure. Mike didn't.
Because,
got him.
Because I'm pretty sure the Board of Fish meetings will be pretty much over by then, if not winding down, because it starts Saturday.
So that'd be the
Friday
14th.
20th or 14th?
No, 21st.
21st, yeah, 21st.
The work session the 21st.
Work session 21st.
Yeah,
at
20th.
The Harbor Shack,
20th.
Upstairs, the Harbor Shack.
20th, or whatever it is.
20th.
And then we could have then 3 days later, before, a special meeting.
And then vote on
Discuss
it
it
and send
and
it
vote
to
on
the
it and
council.
send it on to council.
So that would, Monday is 24th. Wait, oh. Monday is 23rd, Tuesday's 24th,
Yeah, anything
Wednesday,
like that.
25th.
I mean, just so we could expedite this before the 3rd of February.
Right, that's a good idea. So do we need to make a motion or not? Just,
I don't know.
just write down.
I just think we're just gonna, just
Have a
announce it
meeting.
to us, yeah. Yeah, it's not,
I'm good with that. Everybody else okay with that?
Yep.
Okay, well, we'll get,
What day?
Ed on that and,
The Friday the 20th.
okay.
20th?
Is that a noon?
Anything else?
at noon, yeah.
Friday, oh, that's 20th.
Anything else? One once.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all right, those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Meeting is adjourned. An hour and a half.
Well, I thought she was pretty helpful there.
Yeah.
Really valid questions, you know.
We've almost